Hello, this is Mrs. Ross, and these are the Module C, Unit 1, Lesson 3, Matter and Energy and Ecosystems notes. This is from your book, so you can follow along in your book, or you're going to have to pause it. I'm going to go fairly quickly. I'm just going to show you where everything's at, and then you can write it at your own pace if you need to pause, or if you need to allow me to go faster than I am, you can do that too. So the first thing we need is the ecosystem definition, and that's on page 44. We're currently on page 42, so let's move this to 40. There's 43. Here's 44, so let's see if we can find the definition of ecosystem. Okay, a pond, a desert, or a forest is an ecosystem, a complex organization of interdependent parts. So there's your definition, a complex organization of interdependent parts. And for examples of ecosystems, it's right before the definition. A pond, a desert, a forest, those are all ecosystems you can list here. Oops, let me go ahead and push this back up. Okay, so now we're here. What does every ecosystem involve? And it involves two things. Let's see. Every ecosystem involves 1, the flow of energy, and 2, the cycling of non-living resources through a web of producers, consumers, and decomposers. So every ecosystem involves 1, the flow of energy, and 2, the cycling of non-living resources through a web of producers, consumers, and decomposers. So you have both of those. You might want to pause to write that down. Why does it do that every time? And then we have the definition of a food chain on page 45. So let's go ahead and move our book to page 45. A food chain is a pathway that energy and nutrients can follow through an ecosystem. So you have the definition there. The first level of a food chain, so let's see, producers make up the first level of the food chain. So that would be producers. The last level of the food chain, let's see if we can see consumers. No, decomposers complete the food chain. So decomposers would be the last level of the food chain. What level of the food chain is in the middle? That would be your consumers. Let's see, that's right. Producers, consumers, and then decomposers. So that's consumers. The role of decomposers in the food chain. So decomposers complete the food chain. They break down non-living plant and animal matter and return nutrients to soil, where those nutrients can be used by producers. So basically they break down non-living plant and animal matter and return nutrients to the soil. So that would be your information right here. Food web definition. So let's see what the difference between a food chain and a food web is. So there it's highlighted. So interconnected food chains are an example of a food web, a model that shows how energy flows between organisms in an ecosystem. So a food web is a model that shows how energy flows between organisms in an ecosystem, and it's made up of interconnected food chains. So a food chain would be just one source, whereas a food web would be several food chains. First level of the food, wait, no, we did that, sorry. Food web, we're here. The food web depends on what? Let's see. The food web diversity depends on various factors. So one factor is how predators control the population of lower level consumers. That's too far. Hold on. The size of the food web depends on non-living resources available to producers in the ecosystem. That's what I meant here. The food web depends on what? The size of the food web depends on the non-living resources available to producers in the ecosystem. And then one factor in food web diversity is, one factor is how predators control the population size of lower level consumers. How predators control the population size of lower level consumers. That would go here. The arrows in the food web show 3 different things. So let's see, that should still be on 45. So let me see if I can find that, the size of the food web factor. Arrows in the food web show the direction of energy flow, 1. From where it is stored in the plant to where it travels and when the animal is consumed. Okay, all of the energy paths begin with the consumer level. Producer level, consumers feed on plants, animals, and both. Decomposers obtain energy. Okay, okay. So what I would put here is I would put that the arrows in the food web show the direction of energy flow right here from where it is stored in a plant or animal to where it travels when it's consumed. That would be 1. All energy paths begin at the producer level. That would be 2. And then consumers feed on plants, animals, or both. Decomposers obtain energy by breaking down non-living remains. You already have that, the decomposers elsewhere, so I would focus on the consumers for 3. So if you need to pause or go back, rewind me, that's fine. Next page. Where do all energy paths begin? I think this might be... All energy paths begin at the producer level. Producer level. And then I have a practice here. We've done some practice in class. It says label the following organisms in the pond ecosystem on 44 as producers, consumers, and decomposers. So if you go through this, your grasses are producers. Water lily is a producer. That's a plant. Algae is a producer. Your consumers are going to be the raccoon, the turtle, the fish, the heron, which is a bird. And then your decomposer is going to be the earthworm. Okay? So let's scroll on down. We have our first quick check that has this image of a mushroom. Oh, okay. The image shows one type of decomposer. Which statement describes the role of decomposers in a food web? And the answer is B. Decomposers break down matter so plants can use it. Very important. And then we have producers and consumers are both pictured in the diagram, in a diagram of a food web. There shouldn't be a diagram here. Which statement best describes how they differ from one another? And the answer is going to be D. Consumers obtain energy by eating food, whereas producers obtain energy from sunlight. Okay, all the rest of these are not going to be even close. Okay. And then the last question on that page is, a student is identifying food chains in a diagram of a food web. Remember, a food web contains several different food chains. Which of these organisms might be a consumer? So if we look at these, the frog could be a consumer. The water lily and the redwood tree are both going to be producers. They're both plants, and fungus isn't actually a decomposer. So the only one that could be a consumer would be the frog. All right, let's keep going. More quick check information here. What is the primary role of decomposers in the food chain? To recycle energy and materials from dead producers and consumers. That's going to be the very last one here. Different grasses are observed in a microhabitat in a schoolyard. Why is grass an essential part of a healthy ecosystem? It is a producer that is a necessary part of the diet of most consumers. So that's going to be A. Let's keep going. This one has a picture of a mangrove swamp. It says a mangrove swamp contains many organisms living among the large roots of the mangrove trees. The food web shows some of the relationships in that ecosystem. According to the food web, which organism is a producer in the mangrove swamp? So let's see. Mold, which is a decomposer. A prawn is a shrimp. So that's going to be a consumer. A pelican's also a consumer. So your phytoplankton, which is right here. Oh, I didn't mean to draw on that. That's going to be your producer. Okay, let's see. The figure that shows a food chain, this figure shows a food chain that might exist in a meadow. If there was a decrease in the beetle population, that's right here, how might the food chain be affected? And if the beetles decrease, the toads will decrease, the snakes will decrease, and the owls will decrease. Okay, nothing's going to increase. Green plants might increase, but toads will definitely not. So it's going to be the owl population would decrease. Okay, so now we need to go to page 48 to answer this question. So we're on page 45 over here, 46, 47, this is 48. So when organisms obtain energy, where does the energy go? When an organism obtains energy, most of the energy is used for life processes. So one would be life processes. Some of the energy is given off to the environment as heat. So number 2 would be heat. A small amount of energy is stored in the organism's body. So stored in the organism's body. So we have 1, life processes, 2, heat, 3, stored in the organism's body. Oops, sorry. And let me scroll this way. Energy pyramid definition. An energy pyramid is a representation of energy available at each level of the food web. A representation of energy available at each level of the food web. What does the shape of the energy pyramid show? The shape of the energy pyramid shows that there is less energy available at each level. There's less energy available at the top than there is at the bottom. How is the number of organisms at each level limited? The number of organisms that can be supported at each level is limited by the amount of energy available. So it's limited by the amount of energy available because there's less as you go up the pyramid. What level of the pyramid has the most energy? The bottom level, the producers, has the most energy. So the bottom level or the producers. Where is the least amount of energy available in the energy pyramid? Consumers at the highest level have the least amount of available energy. So consumers at the highest level have the least amount of available energy. All right, moving on. It says, what are the steps of the water cycle? We're apparently boiling it down to just 5, and that's on page 49. So we're currently on page, so that's 47, this is 48. We need to go to 49. That's 48, this is 49. And here is the water cycle. Here's where I want you to find those 5 steps. And it doesn't matter what order they're in because they're circular steps. Oops, let's go back. So runoff, evaporation from plants, precipitation, condensation, evaporation from oceans. Those are going to be your 5 steps that you have here. And then it says we have a quick check. So a biologist used a terrarium to model the interactions of plants and animals in a forest ecosystem. Identify one benefit of using this model to study organism interactions. Okay, and so what you'll write here is this is more convenient for the scientist to collect data. If he has a terrarium, which I thought there was going to be a picture of, but apparently it's not there. Maybe it's on the next page and it's not. On your quiz, there will be a picture of a terrarium. A terrarium is an aquarium that doesn't have any water in it. Well, not like fish. It may have like a little pond of water, but mostly it's dry. So one benefit of using this model to study organism interactions is that it's going to be more convenient for a scientist to collect data from this small model than it is from the wild. And then one limitation of this model is that it may not include every factor that affects the interactions in a forest. Okay, so what we're doing is we're making a model of the forest ecosystem, but in an actual forest, you may have more factors that we cannot put into this terrarium. Okay. Check. A slug, a frog, a heron, bird, and grass plant are all part of the same food chain. Through which process does energy get into the food chain? So energy gets into the food chain. It ultimately comes from the sun that's stored in the grass through photosynthesis. So the process that energy gets into the food chain is photosynthesis. Which organisms are consumers in this food chain? The frog, the heron, and the bird are all consumers. The slug is a decomposer. Why would there be fewer herons in the ecosystem than slugs? There should be fewer carnivores than herbivores because so much energy is lost at each level of the food chain. And there's less energy available to large consumers. So remember, as we go up in the energy pyramid, the slugs are going to be kind of down close to the bottom. The herons are going to be closer to the top. There's less energy available where the herons are. That's why there would be less herons than there would be slugs. Fungi are decomposers in this system. Where do they fit into the food chain? Explain. So decomposers actually fit into every level of the food chain because everything dies. You may have dead plants or dead organisms, dead consumers, and at every level you're going to have decomposers. So they break down the remains of producers and composers or consumers alike. Okay, let's see. Carbon is essential to life. Let's see, that's going to be here. I might have to make another video. Let's see how far this goes. Yeah, I think I'm going to make a part 2 video. I'm going to go ahead and stop there right after that quick check. And we'll start again at where it says, why is carbon essential to life on page 50.